It was my honor to introduce our keynote speaker here today, Dixon. Dixon has more than 3 decades of VC experience. He's a pioneer in telecom investment and also pivoted his capital management into DCM with a heavy focus in China and Japan. Now DCM's partners manage 7 funds with more than $2 billion and has invested more than 200 startups across America and China. Previously, Dixon was chairman of U.S. National Venture Capital Association and co-founder of Excel Partners. Dixon currently served on board of directors of DirecTV, Network Equipment Technology, and numerous invested companies. Dixon's accomplishments have been widely recognized, and he received the 2013 Special Achievement Award from the International Business Forum. Now, please join me to welcome Dixon Daw.
Put my slides up there if you don't mind. Just go back a little bit. Thank you. It's a very great pleasure and an honor to be here today to present this keynote at Chief. So I thank to all the sponsors and the people involved in the organization of Chief for giving me this opportunity to spend a few minutes with you. In the 25 to 30 minutes that I will have with you today, I thought I'd tell you very briefly, I'll give it an extremely brief introduction to our firm and just show you some of the companies that we've been involved in. Then I'm going to talk about some perspectives on the state of the U.S. and China venture capital markets. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about attractive opportunity areas that I see both in China and in the U.S. and in possibly in other companies. These are new technology sectors and opportunities for disruption of existing businesses. And then I want to conclude with a brief discussion of a very important thing that happened in the venture capital industry last year, about 15 or 16 months ago, when President Obama signed the Jobs Act into law and really made it dramatically better for all kinds of venture capital companies, both in the U.S. as well as in other parts of the world here to access the capital markets and achieve liquidity for their investors, and then just generally improve our industry, on an overall basis. So our firm, as was mentioned here, has been actively involved in what we call our Golden Triangle strategy of the U.S. These are just a listing of some companies. I'm not going to go through all of these. You can find this information on our website. Some of the China companies that we've been involved in, we've had a total of 10 very successful public offerings, both in the U.S. and in China, across some very seminal companies, including 51 Jobs, VIP Shop, 58.com, and RenRen, to mention only a few. We have a presence in Japan, but we use it principally to support the biz dev opportunities associated with our portfolio companies in both China and in the U.S. as well. So our firm, I'm not going to go through every detail in here, but we got started back in 1996, which in retrospect turned out to be the best vintage year from a performance point of view of any year in the history of the venture capital industry. And that was because mainly when you put seeds in the ground in 96, 97, if you harvested them within the 3 to 4 years later, at the top of the internet bubble, you likely had pretty good returns. We went through the dry years there, starting in 2001 when 9/11 shut everything down for quite a while. We've raised another, I think, 6 or 7 funds here in addition. And across the bottom, we've shown the progression of the offices that we've opened. And just to summarize some of those very quickly, we set up partnerships with some important strategic companies in Japan back in the early 2000s. Then we opened a Beijing office in 2005, and we've been continuing to deepen all of those partnerships as we go forward. We've had a lot of exits, and these are just some summary information. Again, you can find that on our website. So I want to make a little pitch for why venture capital is important. Some of you have probably heard this before, but it's kind of, the older I get, the more shocked I am about how many people in the general citizenry out here really don't understand the role that venture capital plays. So I'm asking a simple question here, and if you wanted to take the guess that all of these companies were hugely successful, you'd be right. And if you wanted to say also that they were backed by professional venture capitalists, you'd also be right. So venture capital drives global innovation and job creation, and it isn't all about just making money or starting transformative companies. The middle portion of this diagram here shows the fact that 1 out of 3 Americans have had their lives positively impacted by the products and services of venture-backed life sciences companies, which have only been happening for probably the last 35 or 40 years. And that's not necessarily happening all over the world. Clean tech has also played a very important role in getting us almost to the point of energy self-sufficiency, which is a huge economic and strategic value item for the U.S. Another thing that venture capital is very well known for is that people that invest in it, they take big risks, they back managers that hopefully produce good returns. But just from a purely financial point of view, the top performing venture-backed companies and partnerships here, if you look at investment returns out there across a longer 10, 15, and 20-year period, you're going to see that these asset classes, particularly early stage VC, significantly outperform the alternatives of public stocks, the NASDAQ, and the S&P 500. So, well, the world is changing, though, in a big way, and I just want to make that contrast here with a quick illustration of the difference between VC 1.0 and VC 2.0 here. Back when I came into the business, virtually all the venture capital activity in those days was in the U.S. All the complete makeup of the company, all startups got either born in Silicon Valley or Boston. I should have put that up here for this particular slide. But the best engineers gravitated toward the hot spots in the U.S. We would focus on a single geographic market, typically U.S. consumers or U.S. enterprises. And almost always the exits involved the NASDAQ. But in the last decade, we've gone completely away from those U.S. defining constraints to the point now where companies are started anywhere, talent and opportunities everywhere in the world. People focus on multiple geographies on day one when they go out, and the exit market is now global. Companies are taken public in China, in Hong Kong, in the U.S., in London, in Russia, and Tokyo, and you name it. And so the overall leaders in these in the current times that we're in are people that have a rich degree of international experience and are very adaptable and flexible as far as picking their teams and their locations. Real quickly, just to put the numbers in perspective here, this chart shows you the dollars that were invested by country in the year 2012, and then the dollars that were raised in the same period. And it shows that the U.S. is a very dominant percentage of the market here, with dollars invested being 62.5% last year, and the dollars raised were down to a number of about 20.6 billion. I want to put another item in context here. Many people are beginning to ask with the Twitter-like IPOs and things like that, are we approaching or are we in an actual bubble like we were back in the year 2000? And I say to that, no. I think some sectors and some companies in those sectors are getting pricey. I would grant you that, but I don't think that it's a pervasive across-the-board bubble like we had back in the 99-2000 timeframe. Another comment here is just important. So how much money was raised in the year 2000, if I can really make a contrast here? Instead of the $20 billion that we raised up here last year, back in the year 2000, we raised $100 billion in the US. And that's definitely going to lead to a bubble condition when you have so much money forcing its way into the industry and not enough good places to put it to work. So we have then this fall off on the other countries, but to be sure, the entrepreneurial and company creation activities are really, really, broadening out internationally. The Israelis are continuing to perfect great technologies in Israel, but to have the commitment to, when a company reaches critical mass with its products, to move to the US or some other location where they can set up marketing and market those products and services to a global consumer. Some industry facts right now. The growth rate here in 08 to 12, China was clearly the number one growth country in the market. And you notice that the internet usage is only 42% of the population at the end of 2012. So there's a long way to go for additional upside on these Chinese internet companies, as well as in all of these other countries that have not yet even reached 55% or 50% of the population having internet coverage. And the US shows up down in 10th place here because it's a much more mature country vis-a-vis internet usage. I'm not going to say too much about this chart here except to explain that the top little pyramid up here summary. It says that there are basically 6 public companies in the world, the internet companies, that have revenue growth of more than 30% and an EBITDA of more than 30% growth. Only 6 in the world. This number is going to get changed a little bit here when Alibaba goes public in the next few months. There'll be some other changes to it as well, but these changes with China and the other emerging markets coming in here, I just want everybody to go out of here with the key message is that it's really hard to build a top-of-the-world internet company. And there are 18 companies only in the world that in 2011 and 2012 had revenue growth of more than 30%. And there's 44 companies in the world that had revenue growth of more than 30%. So it's a tough business to go out and build one of these world-class internet companies. Some of the big drivers that'll set the stage for our next discussion of attractive opportunities. We've all been reading and knowing about mobile, but this just puts it, a little bit of perspective here about how explosively mobile is growing, and it's not expected to slow down at any time soon. Okay, quick summary of the U.S. venture capital ecosystem. Over the last couple of years, some of the funds that are being raised have kind of come down a little bit in size from what they were during the periods of 5 to 10 years before. And this is actually good, both for investors as well as for the entrepreneurial community as well. We have angels that have become increasingly prominent in the overall startup ecosystem, including many, many of those groups that are represented here at this conference. And valuations have, as I mentioned before, they've been soaring for really hot companies, but by and large, they're not out of control. Although there's been a steady uptick in valuations if you go and look at all the companies across the board, but it's not out of control, except one might argue for some of the real rock star companies there. And so this is just a chart to show you that in 2013, kind of the sweet spot of the sizes of venture funds raised in the U.S. here is in the $100 to $500 million size. Now let me just discuss kind of the same fact base for the China market. It had a very difficult time in 2012, and that was precipitated by some well-known accounting scandals that surfaced in 2011 and kind of scared institutional investors to the sidelines. Really, from about middle of 2011 till the early part of 2012, maybe it was a little bit earlier in 11, there were not very many at all. In fact, I think there was only one company that came out, and that was a company called VIP Shop, which we happened to be involved in DCM. And it had a very hard time getting public because of this overhang of the scandals. But once things began to stabilize and the company got out in the marketplace and started executing, it has performed spectacularly well. And nobody's been concerned about accounting scandals and some of this general overhang. So there have been a total of 5 new Chinese IPOs as of like about 3 weeks ago that have happened here in the US this year. And that's kind of in contrast. That's probably 5 times as many as there were last year. So the market for Chinese companies going public in the US is definitely getting better. And there's a significant rebound. The aftermarket performance of these Chinese companies is doing very, very well here in the US. And the Chinese government's doing whatever it can to try and modernize its own domestic venture ecosystem, but it has not really managed yet to come up with a China version of NASDAQ or a China version of the New York Stock Exchange, unless you would consider that to be the Hong Kong exchange. So one of the things that's happening, that's helping all of these good things in the capital markets are, some really good macro variables, which really drive the effect of whether or not a company if there's any public market at all. Funds flows are great this year. This is $27 billion going into equity markets. The S&P 500, as we know, is up very considerably this year. And most importantly, the volatility is stayed well below the danger zones of 18 to 20. And that's a really good thing that makes institutional investors much more willing to step in and take a look at investing in some of the better tech IPOs. Another reason is, no surprise, their aftermarket performance has been spectacular this year. 60% on the IPOs that have come out so far, according to our friends at JP Morgan. The other last point that I'll make here is that the reason these public companies in the tech space are doing so well is it's really the only sector that institutional investors can go and look at where they can find growth. So if you just look at the standard one-year projections of revenue growth for all the companies that are listed in the public markets right now, only 6% of them have a business plan out there or numbers out there with the analysts that show more than a 30% revenue growth. That number is ridiculously low. You've got very small, less than 10% of them. 42% are forecasting a revenue growth between 0 and 10%. That's not going to get anybody very excited. So I would just close on this capital market thing here by saying that the market is I personally am quoted in this a couple of times. I think it's the best public market for tech IPOs since the year 2000. It's not better than it was in the year 2000, but it's better than any year that we've had since then. And probably the best one since then was 2000. And it's almost everybody believes that we're going to have a better year this year by almost any way you look at it than the market that we had in the year 2007. So, in summary, U.S. capital markets have been uplifted by the passage of the Jobs Act that we'll say a few more words about here in a minute. A lot of very interesting new companies, some of which are summarized here on this chart. You can find these on the internet again as well. We've had great aftermarket performance and levels of activity that are not there since the 1999 and 2000. I know there's a lot of people here looking at biotech, and I can tell you this is far and away the best year for biotech IPOs that we've had since going way back when, and it's actually managed to literally save the venture industry, because they've had some of these companies that just haven't been able to raise money, and they finally, because of the passage of the Jobs Act, were able to go out and raise money as an emerging growth company over the last couple of years and get public and begin to make things look like the good old days of late 90s. I'm going to skip over this one. M&A's been stalled in the U.S. by virtue of our archaic repatriation tax policies, in which companies are forced to pay an absurd tax of 25 to 35% on dollars that they bring back here associated with doing acquisitions. And so until we get that straightened out, M&A is going to still be stymied, and all the big Chinese companies that are starting to spend money on M&A don't have to deal with that constraint. So we don't have a level playing field there, thanks to the U.S. Congress. China capital markets. IPOs are still the predominant exit, but M&A is definitely on the rise. The overseas IPOs, as I've mentioned before, are coming back strong. There's still some concerns out there, but I think people are getting more comfortable with them. Chinext is an exchange in China that is evolving toward trying to become the next NASDAQ in China, but it requires an RMB structure. And you've got increasingly Chinese companies are getting very aggressive in their overseas investment and M&A spending, and I think that trend is absolutely going to continue. This has been driven by the strong performance of these Chinese ADRs, and the percent share price increases here are shown. Those bars in red happen to be DCM companies. We've been fortunate enough to have 5 companies that are on this list here, and getting more than our fair share of exits in China. But we're all doing, all of these that are up here on this chart are done in the U.S. Sorry. Okay, so now spend a couple of minutes on attractive opportunity areas. I'm not going to go through every one of these in great detail, but we've already alluded to the entire mobile ecosystem is filled with opportunity, innovation in financial technologies, collaborative consumption, and then the smart home and wearables. And I'll give you some examples of each of those here in just a second. And then the final comment would be that these platforms like Android and Facebook and Amazon, as they equalize here, they're stimulating cross-border deployment of applications and services and allowing them to expand into international markets very effectively. I want to show you the kind of the unique aspects of the mobile ecosystem here with a picture. Happened to have dinner last night with somebody who asked me if I'd heard of the concept of the second screen. I said, yeah, I've heard of the concept of the second screen, but have you heard of the concept of the 5 screens in the mobile revolution? And so we started talking about this, but this is literally true. I mean, in the home, you've got TVs and, virtually all the tablets now that are used in conjunction with cable services or pay TV services or internet television are effectively, TV screens for a large number of people, including especially large number of much younger folks. Tablets, then they give rise to smartphones. I think you're going to see smartphones beginning to be used more in the home with the explosion in apps that are continuing. And the last one then is one that I hadn't even really spent that much time thinking about it, but the car is going to really become maybe one of the most sophisticated mobile devices in the world in the next 5 years. There's not an automotive company worth its salt that doesn't have some kind of a project going in Silicon Valley right now to essentially take advantage of the fact that the driver is holding on to the steering wheel, and they have measurements in there that are measuring all of that driver's vital signs and all the stuff that you see from these new health devices, and figuring out ways to generate recommendations, figuring out ways to avoid distractions and make driving safer, but offer more and more services. So stay tuned on that one. Smartphones have exploded. Media consumption has gone over the roof. And we got financial services institutions going crazy with innovation here. Some of the big, just some examples here are like one of the next hot IPOs that people are talking about is Square. It's a financial service where you can pay for transactions and sign for them on a tablet, and the debit goes right to the credit card. I'll show you a picture here. There's some other companies in here that you can check on if you have time. One very innovative one in P2P student lending is SoFi. You might want to check that out. All kinds of new exploding innovations in money transfer and payment systems, and collaborative consumption now, which is another exploding area. And I rather suspect that if you look to most countries outside the US, you don't really see a pervasive presence of some of these new innovative services like Uber and Lyft and Blackjet. Then we got the hotel replacements or room sharing services like Airbnb. We've got the commerce activities that are being stimulated by Kickstarter and Quirky. And these new innovations allow the consumers to really, and the vendors to scale the volumes rapidly, as well as to expand geographically in a very rapid way. This is just an example of the growth of exponential growth in this collaborative consumption from Kickstarter and Airbnb. I'm going to just move to wrapping up here because I know we're tight on time. Smart home and wearables was one of the new innovations that are absolutely going to become important. I think it's widely understood and known that Google Glass and many other wearables of that ilk are becoming very important innovations and very important new platforms to build new applications that are going to lead the way for some great new companies in the next 5 years. We've talked about smartphones and tablets. They're also becoming the brains of the smart TV and the smart home. And this is some of the projections that are out there in the marketplace right now for the evolution of wearables. My takeaway from all of this is that wearables are for real. I was at a conference, probably one of the best wireless conferences just a couple of weeks ago down in Southern California. And number one trend that this conference reported is the emergence of wearables as a really critical factor in the next wave of innovation here. So I want to wrap up now with some reasons for optimism about venture capital. And I'm going to show you some photographs here of when we went to the White House a year ago in April and got the jobs bill signed, which has helped pave the way for some important successes. I happened to be invited to this because I started some work a few years ago to help unjam the system, which I considered it to be quite constipated in terms it was very difficult to get IPOs and M&As done. And there were just a lot of really stupid rules that were in place that nobody ever thought to go back and fix. So we put together a bunch of people on the National Venture Capital Association that took a thoughtful look at this and got, through some miracle, persuaded the president that it was an important thing to do. And to his credit, he recognized it. This is a picture of the Rose Garden the 2 days before the Easter egg hunt. Here's the actual signing of the bill itself. Then a few of the leading congressmen that were involved and women that were involved in the signing here. That's myself with two colleagues, Paul Mader and Ray Rothrock, who were also chairs from the National Venture Capital Association that worked diligently to help get this stuff in place. And then that's the expansion of the team there to include the staff at the NVCA. So I'm just going to wrap up. I'll have time for maybe a few questions, and if we run out of time, I'll be glad to meet individually outside for a reasonable period of time, although I can't stay for 3 hours. The Jobs Act has allowed for companies to come in and file all together on the same playing field. Now, U.S. companies and foreign companies can both keep their filings confidential until they go on the road show. Up until the Jobs Act happened, U.S. had to hang out all their dirty laundry on the web and let their competitors and their customers see how well or how bad they were doing, and so they would frequently be dissuaded not to even seriously consider that. 2/3 of the IPOs in 2013 have resulted, they've come from confidential filings that became non-confidential only right at the end, right before they started the road shows. This particular law is also widely regarded. If you want to just go talk to anybody in the biotech industry, that is widely acclaimed as the reason that the IPOs have picked up again in the life sciences area, and I hope that that's going to continue. So, last slide, and then questions. Venture returns, as a result of some of these positive changes that have been occurring in the last couple of years, have started to return to what I call their historically high norms or superior norms. But it's no question about it, from 2000 up until very recently, the returns have been pretty much in the tank. But a lot of it's due to market conditions. But there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, in summary, going forward here. I think that a tremendous amount of this opportunity is going to be involving China, and I look forward to to having the opportunity to answer a few questions and hopefully stay in touch with this wonderful group and come back and report on the industry again sometime in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dixon, for the inspiring speech. And actually, we have opportunities to ask you 2 questions, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Okay.
So who will want to be the...
Now I'll meet outside.
Sure. And who will want to be the first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is simple. Because DCM definitely has enjoyed much of the China's success stories. So what is your most significant failure in your investment career, especially the most expensive lesson you paid to learn from China? I mean, the lesson from China in your investment career.
I'm not going to answer your question directly, but I'm going to get fairly close.
Okay.
Okay, the first clue is that the most significant failure, that the first part of the question that you asked, I'm not going to mention any company by name, but I will tell you that it has not been in China. Okay? And I will say that that it has happened a couple of times when we did not pay attention to checking out I was talking to you right before this session about the importance of backing great people. And so, it happens in every venture firm that I've ever seen. People want to rush into a deal, and they find excuses about why they don't need to do their homework and check out the people. It's like, there's an analogy, if you're a pilot, it's called the pilot check before you take off on an airplane. There's a whole bunch of things that you have to do. And the only time when you get in trouble is when you cut corners, or somebody on your team is supposed to check out somebody and you find out something that is really bad, and you put the money in and you didn't pay attention to that, and then bad things happen. So that's as far as I want to go on answering the question.
Thank you.
I did find a way to lose my entire investment a couple of times, but that's one of the good things about the investment in the venture business. You can never lose more than the money you put in, and you can always make a lot more if you do well.
Thank you.
Any others?
Let's find someone
Okay.
from there.
Okay, give them right here.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. The next thing that's it's not I hope it's coming. It's actually called Startup 3.0, where a bunch of the leaders that promoted the Jobs Act realized that there were still some things that needed to be done. And so one of the things that in Startup Act 3.0, and it was supposed to be working its way through the Senate right now, but it got bogged down and it got cast behind immigration, because immigration is so controversial. It shouldn't be controversial, but it is. And so the president just kind of decided to not really push on Startup 3.0. But you go check it out on the web, but some of the things that it has in there are features like a proposal for startups that raise money for their first round from entrepreneurs or investors or whatever. If they hold the investment more than 5 years, they pay zero tax. That's a great proposal to stimulate entrepreneurial activity for sure. And a whole bunch of other stuff that's not directly related to Startup 3.0, but the sorting out this international repatriation thing that we talked about in here to stimulate international M&A. You're going to have countries like China, they're going to be out spending like crazy to buy new properties all over the world, and they don't have this disadvantage. So just go check out Startup 3.0 on the web. I think something like Startup 3.0 is actually going to make it through. I just don't know when, and it's hard to know with all the distractions that you have to deal with in Washington when those things might actually happen. But I think that everybody that's paid attention to them thinks that they're good and that they're valuable for the industry, and so I hope that that things will prevail just like they did when we got round one of the jobs done. Okay, I think do you have one quick one?
Yeah, here's a very quick question. Mr. Dao, I'm a graduate student from MIT Sloan School of Management. I have a question about the career path in the VC industry. How would you suggest young people, especially those ones that have non-technology background, to approach the venture capital industry and finally launch a successful career in this industry?
That's actually a question that I've been asked about, it feels like 1 million times in my career. I'll try to give you some highlights.
Not today, right?
It's, the standard speech, and I don't think it's wrong, quite frankly, is to, you got to go out and build your own personal network and get the opportunity to either meet some VCs, or probably the best thing that you can do is to go into a portfolio company and really be a star, okay? That's the #1 best thing that you can do. You get operating experience that way. You get to know a lot of the people that are investors in the company. You get to present to the board meetings. You maybe get to go to the conferences. You'll develop your own peer network from other firms in the industry. And
what do you mean by a portfolio company? Do you mean a buy-side investment fund?
No, I'm telling you to go and get involved in a venture-backed startup or a company that receives its initial funding, of which there's many, many here in this room. You go in there and get a job there and learn about what it's really like to grow and build a business. And then you get the benefit of building your personal network with the venture community that way too. That's a very hard social network to crack, believe me. But it's worth it if you really want to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you again for the great inspiring research and sharing your insights.